So Pete Hegseth's lack of experience for a position as significant as Defense Secretary is raising questions about his views on the U.S. military and its role at home and abroad. Peter Bergen, a national security analyst for CNN, went through Hegseth's book, The War on Warriors, which was published in June. Bergen writes the book is an odd mix of slogans and unsupported assertions about the purportedly Marxist and woke U.S. military. It is 228 pages long and has no footnotes and few facts to back up its claims, some of which are dubious at best. Bergen continues. Hegseth spends a chapter of his book on dumping on the trans troops in the U.S. military, whom he portrays as a key plank of the Pentagon's purportedly woke agenda. Bergen points out that Hegseth's writings about trans troops is a sizable red herring, even using a high-end estimate to only about 0.5% of service members are trans people. Hegseth's book is also silent on the big issues that a future Secretary of Defense might have to face, such as the Chinese possibly invading Taiwan. Meanwhile, the New Republic outlines Hegseth's prediction that the military may have to mobilize against U.S. citizens in a civil war.
And here it is.
That comes from his 2020 book, American Crusade. In it, Hegseth writes, America will decline and die. A national divorce will ensue.
Very patriotic.
Outnumbered freedom lovers will fight back. The military and police, both bastions of freedom-loving patriots, will be forced to make a choice. It will not be good. Yes, there will be some form of civil war. In another section, Hegseth writes that our present moment is much like the 11th century. We do not want to fight, but like our fellow Christians 1,000 years ago, we must arm yourself, metaphorically, intellectually, physically. Our fight is not with guns yet.
So, Admiral Stavridis, there's so many things that are so effing. It's early in the morning. I'm going to give moms and dads across the East Coast a break.
Yeah, you just don't need to do it.
So crazy. But what is so disturbing, especially for those concerned about the implementation of the Insurrection Act, is you have a guy here in a book that is saying that America is on decline and dying. That's a lie. It's a total, absolute lie. Our military is stronger than any time since 45 relative to the rest of the world. Our economy, the envy of the world. I was overseas this weekend. I can tell you, everybody wringing their hands, asking why they can't be more like America. Our allies across Europe just looking at our strength economically right now and just beyond themselves. I mean, America economically stronger than it has been in such a long time relative to the rest of the world. And yet we have a guy who wants to be head of the DOD talking about America dying, America collapsing, America in the 11th century. This is the Crusades. There is going to be a civil war. The military and the police are going to take up arms against its own people. What do you say to the Republican senators and the Democratic senators that are going to have to vote on this nominee?
I'm going to pick up three threads. One is the personal character issues. I think those are very, very important. I think more to follow on that as the FBI report comes out. I thought significant that Secretary-designate Hegseth indicated supposedly to Lindsey Graham that he is going to allow the woman who he allegedly sexually assaulted to be free of her non-disclosure. All of that is going to come out. Character matters. Number two, what you just unpackaged, Joe, it's the policy questions. I agree with your assessment of all that. I want to add one that didn't come out vividly there, and it's his comments about women. Women in combat, women in the armed forces. He's trying to kind of walk back from that. But the gist of his commentary thus far has been women are not additive to the mission of the Department of Defense. Look, I commanded thousands of women in combat starting in 1993 when I was captain of a destroyer with a crew that had both men and women. I've commanded women in carrier strike groups under my command in Afghanistan and U.S. Southern Command. Women at the Naval Academy, we talked about the Army-Navy game, there are 22 guys on the field. There are 8,000 people in the stands from Annapolis and West Point. 1/3 of them are women. So that basket of policy issues, both the ones you described, and I want to hear from him, full-throated support for women in combat in the military, because that's the reality. You can't man 100% of the force with 50% of the population. That's a recruiting challenge no one will overtake.
Yeah, and Elise Jordan, I find it hard to believe that Joni Ernst, who understands about women in combat, who understands about sexual abuse, who understands all the things that she understands. There's never been a nominee more lined up for her to vote against. Is she really going to fold on all of her principles, on everything she has fought for on the Armed Services Committee regarding the protection of women in and out of uniform because a couple of ads are run against her?
And what could he say now? What could he say that would unsay?
There's nothing that he can do to unsay what he has said. 16% of the U.S. military, women. I have embedded with female Marines in Helmand who have been under fire. Women in combat, they handle it just fine. They handle it just as fine as the men. The fact that we want this retrograde throwback, I don't get the balance between
to the 11th century.
The Crusades.
It used to be like, oh, they want to go back to the 1950s. He wants to go back to the 11th century.
No, I don't get it at all. How do you have Elon on the one hand saying that our tech is so outdated and antiquated, and then you have a defense nominee who wants to go back to the Crusades? It makes no sense.